we have 100% success rate on pilots. Like if somebody does a pilot with us, they use us. And that is not normal in life sciences.
Welcome to Data and Biotech, a podcast from Cordi where we explore how companies leverage data to drive innovation in life sciences. Every 2 weeks, we sit down with an expert from the world of biotechnology to understand how they're using data science to solve technical challenges, streamline operations, and further innovation in their business. Here we go.
Ander Tallet, welcome to the Data and Biotech podcast.
Great. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, just to kick us off, would you mind introducing us to you and your background and what brings you here?
Yeah, happy to. Here for APS PharmSci 360, where Dash Bio is one of the sponsors. We've done a number of events this year as we get out the brand and the name and awareness of the new platform that we've built. So my background, I actually started in the hedge fund world, went to business school, launched a company, built and sold that company, and then was building my next company, which is called Argent Skis, and I pitched that to Stefan Boncel, who is the CEO of Moderna, small biotech at the time, 150 people. And he made a really good offer, which was, hey, well, instead of doing that, why don't you think about coming in and joining my biotech? And thankfully, I did that, took him up on the idea. I joined Moderna Therapeutics back in 2015. So I teamed up with a good friend of mine and colleague from Moderna, Dave Johnson, who gone on to be the chief data officer, and we built Dash. So that's where I am now.
So, through all of your experience, you've had a lot of opportunities to be on the procurement side of working with CROs. So, I'm interested in, what was the perspective that you had on sort of the CRO marketplace that led you to want to, go into that with the launch of Dash?
Yeah, I'll actually go back in time a bit. It's not my first time building a marketplace. I tried in 2012, I tried to build a marketplace for car repair. And the idea was, hey, the marketplace will make this better. We'll do Dutch auctions and sort of an auction model, and people can go and, get the services that they need. There's actually a really good analogy here, which is two things. One, people don't always know all the services they need. They don't have enough detail to go and buy. And two, the service providers are not transparent or easy to work with. And so regardless of building a marketplace on top of it, if there's no transparency, if there's no good discovery function, if there's no good sort of data management function, the marketplace doesn't work. And if you think about the best run marketplace on earth is the US stock exchange, right? I mean, it's a brilliantly run marketplace. I used to work in that area doing securities lending. And when you buy shares, most people probably don't think about the fact they're buying them from somebody else, right? You just transacted with someone else. And actually, it used to be, now it's moved to T+1, it used to be a T+3 settlement period. It took 3 days for those shares to be allocated to your account. Nobody cared because there was a central counterparty that did a brilliant job of matching up all the trades and making sure everything ran smoothly. And as a retail customer, you never noticed the difference. But when you talk about it in terms of, say, CRO services, if the quote is, well, now we need to talk to you and you have to have 5 meetings to get a quote, that's not a product. That's a consulting engagement. And that's exactly how the industry works today. It's not productized, it's not transparent, and it takes 4, 5, 6 scoping calls and probably a dinner at Legal Seafood before you can actually get a contract. Or honestly, even get a price, not even a contract, a price. Like they literally won't send you the price until you've had 4 or 5 discussions, and they'll only send you the price in a PowerPoint deck on a call. You don't get to do a pre-read. But it's all these really frustrating things that come from opaque markets where it feels like, that same frustration we feel with buying a house or buying a used car, areas where we as buyers don't have transparency and it's not easy to transact. We feel that with CROs, and it's a consistent problem.
Can you unpack what it means for a CRO to embody that level of productization and transparency that you're talking about lacking in the marketplace?
Yeah, so we actually have seen this a little bit in the in the nucleotide space, in the DNA RNA space. If I'm ordering oligos, I can get pretty transparent pricing, and a lot of those vendors have gotten better over the years. Where like you just buy from them, right? You know what you want, you know what it's going to cost you. You've got some kind of integration set up, maybe even have a punch out set up through your procurement platform. Maybe you've got a P card or V card, some way to easily transact with them. You just go buy what you need, right? And like that pricing, you don't even think of them as CROs anymore. You wouldn't think of them as a CRO. That's the way that we want Dash to be to our customers. I mean, we're providing CRO services, but we don't want people to think of us as a CRO, because that, to us, what it means is, we're not a consulting based model. It's not, we're not selling labor. It's not how many hours did our scientists work on this. You're buying a product, an outcome. You're buying a result. And in that way, it's much more like, AWS, right? Where if you ask me, who are the database architects who work on my AWS account? The answer is I have no idea. And I will never know. I will never know. And I would never ask for their resumes. But when you buy bioanalysis services today, the first thing you do is you say, who's going to be the person on my account? Because what you're essentially doing is buying that person's time. And whereas with Dash, I mean, we get that question because that's every other vendor. That's the question you need to ask. But with us, that's not really a question that has a lot of impact, because what you essentially you're doing is you're buying an outcome from a productized platform that guarantees a result, and you pay for the result. You pay for the data that comes back to you. That's what you're paying for, as opposed to you're not paying for the input. You're not saying, hey, well, I'll basically almost prepay for the labor and I hope we get the data back later. It's a very different model. And I hopefully, we help change the industry for the better and accelerate things.
This is very close to my heart because, I'm a consultant. I work for a consulting organization. I'm very familiar with sort of the division between consulting services, especially on the data and analytics side, and sort of the productization. And one of the challenges that you constantly run into when you're trying to productize something that's more services oriented is, how you standardize your offerings so that
Absolutely.
you can understand your own cost basis, understand the work that's going to need to go in, and you can give that transparency to your external customers. So I'm interested from you and how you think about that problem in terms of, how you establish Dash as a platform that offers that transparency and sort of makes it the business that you need it to be for it to work that way.
Building a transparent platform, one of the challenges that you've seen historically in the CRO space is that it was difficult to productize because everything was sort of seen as an edge case or corner case. And that's often how I've also built a consulting company, and there are times that is the right answer, right? The right answer is have really good consultants and good project management, and every, the problems are unique. Usually they're unique problems that require unique solutions. But when you look at the bioanalysis market, ELISA is a 6-year-old assay that we know well. And honestly, it's not unique. Every one of them, they have very common steps. There's a lot of commonality between each ELISA. And we can parameterize that, plug it into, in our case, custom built, lab OS operating system that we've built, basically a LIMS LES system. The terminology LIMS has been overused and means a million different things, but essentially it runs the equipment, right? It takes the order, it builds the run list and pushes that down onto the equipment. In this case, the equipment is a combination of liquid handlers and readers. And some processing steps up front if you want to do extractions and sample management. So you put that together, and you've taken something that was historically a consulting engagement, and you've turned it into a product. And the best analogy I can still give for this is there's two that I use consistently. It's the SpaceX building the Falcon 9 of hey, here's a fixed, consistent way to get a kilogram to low Earth orbit, as opposed to the Boeing ULA model of, hey, we'll do a cost plus engagement to build you a rocket however you want it to look, right? And it's a very different concept. And the other, of course, to me, is always AWS, right? There were, before pre-AWS, there were lots of people who would help you build a data center, but you couldn't just go out and buy compute on demand. And that's, our goal is to be that kind of transparent, easy to use infrastructure backbone for your biotech company, for your pharma company.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. But I think what might help me is sort of understanding from your perspective, the competitive dynamics of the bioanalysis market. Because one of the things I've heard a lot in the conversations today and in the conversations in the past is that a lot of biotechs and pharma want to use fewer vendors, and so I see a lot or vertically integrated sort of CROs that'll just do all of the different services so that it's a single point of action. But you're much closer to it, so be interested to you where do you see like where do you see the opportunity for, this model inside of the competitive landscape of CROs?
Yeah, so there's this classic debate in the clinical world, which is functional service provider versus full service outsourcing. And it is literally the same discussion as in the SaaS world, best of breed versus best of suite. It's the same concept, right? And just like in the software world where it vacillates and over time it goes from best of suite to best of breed, best of suite back again. And we've seen this, right? We've lived this shift. It was, 90s was all best of suite. I go to SAP, I buy everything I need. Or Oracle, 10 years ago was all best of breed. I integrated it all myself. And now I feel like we're shifting back again with companies building best of suite models. That same, back and forth happens in the clinical outsourcing world, where especially big pharma goes through these cycles of, hey, we should own each one of the relationships and get the best provider for each one. Or it's actually way easier for us just to have one relationship and they handle everything. The good news is in either one, us as a bioanalysis provider can succeed. No large CRO wants to do the kind of BioA work that we're doing at scale. They can maybe do a little bit of automation. Maybe they can do a little bit of sort of tech applied to their BioA processes, but they're nowhere close to kind of the infrastructure investment that we have, right? The turnaround times, the quality of the platform. We're breaking boundaries significantly, not by like a little bit. I mean, we've cut timelines by over 90%. It's not like a small drop. It's a massive shift. So that I think there'll always be, a good place for a best of breed type vendor for a functional service provider in the BioA space, and frankly, also we're very happy to partner up with other CROs.
So you've had this experience being in procurement for Moderna, and as part of that procurement, I'm assuming you were procuring CRO services. So you had this experience of like managing and procuring CRO services, and so like the webinar that you just put on was how to beat up your CRO.
I beat up the CRO.
Okay. So I would love to hear what are some of the questions that you would recommend that organizations ask their CROs as they're considering which CROs to work with, and like sort of understanding the trade-offs of decisions that they make in that domain.
Yeah. So I mean, I'll start with an anecdote, which is actually on the CDMO side, the manufacturing side. But I was buying CDMO services for Moderna, and this was pre-pandemic, but 2018 sort of timeframe, 2018, 2019. And the question I got from the CDMO was, how would you like the data back on a USB stick or a DVD, a burned DVD? And I thought, wow, like that is just a wildly anachronistic question, right? Like, do I want it on a USB? Like neither. I want an integration. I want you to send me my information. I want to tie it into my system, LIMS or MES, right? As needed. I want to tie it into the platforms that I run, and I ran enterprise systems for Moderna, so I was in charge of all these sort of large COT systems, and that's still what we see in the CRO space, right? How would you like your data, right? It's this sort of anachronistic model. A few years ago we went through a boom in biotech, and that changed a lot of things, right? Where biotechs could raise money, and that was great. There was a risk-on environment from an investor perspective, and a lot of capital flowed into biotech. But on the other side of that, the same pipeline existed in preclinical and clinical, the same service providers, and they're linearly scalable. They're hard to scale. It's hard to hire more senior scientists in Wisconsin, right? That is a hard problem to solve. And if the way you're solving scalability is how many senior scientists can I have at a facility in Wisconsin, you're not going to be able to double or triple capacity, right? And that's the huge difference with Dash, where for us that's a CapEx question, right? It's how do I buy and finance more equipment, but I don't need that sort of linear growth. Because of that, with the CROs unable to scale up, 2021, 2022, we saw a huge demand constraint, right? There's a capacity constraint. I mean, you saw it in just lab space in Boston, right? 97% occupancy in lab space in Boston, right? Similar, like it takes a while to scale up lab space. It's a physical constraint in that case. The CROs were in the position of having all the power in the negotiation. We're at full capacity. You're a smaller biotech. The bigger players are buying up everything I've got. So I mean, first, even if I take the time to talk to you, I don't really need to negotiate anything. I just dictate terms. It's kind of a take it or leave it type situation. Fast forward 2 years later, unfortunately, we've gone through a real downturn in the funding cycle for biotech. We've seen some real challenges over the last 24 months for biotech, really since November of 22. Actually, so I guess it's 3 years. It's a very different market. But the good news is for the biotech companies that are scaling, that are heading into the clinic, that are heading into a phase and going from phase 1 to phase 2, phase 2 to phase 3, you have a lot more leverage negotiating with your CROs than you did in the past. You've got a lot more ability to dictate terms, to push for terms that are preferential to you, flexibility, scalability, data management, integration, all the commercial terms where they have to put some skin in the game, they have to put something at risk. It's a very different market than it was a few years ago. And if I spent most of my career on sort of biotech buy side. If I was on the buy side right now, I'd say, yeah, use that leverage. The cool thing is building Dash, like we built that concept in. Right now we have fully transparent pricing. It's all up on the website on our pricing page. And then beyond that, we've gone and actually built, I think as far as we know, an industry first. We have a full self-quoting tool. So you can go on our website, go from the pricing page to the quoting tool, and then you can build your own quote for bioanalysis surveys. It's got everything that you need on there. You can do multiplex, you can do the different assay types, you can see the discounts on sample volumes. Send that quote into the team, and quickly we can turn that into a project for you. I mean, extremely rapid turnaround. But yeah, completely transparent pricing. So that for me, that's how I'd rather shop at a store that tells me the price before I walk in, right? Like that's a benefit to a customer. And usually opaque pricing is the seller trying to take some advantage of the situation through that opacity. We believe in transparency. We believe in making it easier on the buyer. And so hopefully that's all an advantage for the biotech companies out there.
Yeah, I mean, and so like as I'm hearing you talk, it occurs to me that you've been in the situation of not having transparent pricing, and also of having terms dictated to you, but also having sort of an industry landscape where the expectations on CROs were not necessarily that they send you data like in an API friendly format or something like that. So there's like an element of culture change that needs to happen here. Can you like help me understand what that culture change is, and why you think things are the way they are, and what it takes to get the industry to a place where they have these reasonable expectations that you're suggesting?
Biotech is an industry that traditionally has been light on tech. Obviously somewhat ironic, right? But look, the science is incredible, right? The science is absolutely incredible. But we haven't, as an industry, invested that much in sort of tech platforms. And there's a whole bunch of structural reasons that that's the case. Structurally, when you think about a biotech company, and maybe this is somewhat cynical, but it's really true, its job is essentially to de-risk an asset for big pharma. I mean, that's the valuation model, that's the funding model. And so if your funding model is, how do I take an asset to phase 2, phase 3, maybe commercial, but that's actually really rare. All the other things that say you would build if you're building a large commercial organization, there's no reason for you to build. And frankly, it's not only you're not rewarded for that, you're kind of penalized because you're spending investor dollars on things that don't add value to your business. And so as an organization, as an industry, we tend not to have been historically very sort of tech oriented or forward thinking on the technology front.
It sounds like you're doing really interesting things on the automation front. And so I would love to sort of dig in into what does automation look like in Dash's lab? So like from sample arriving to like result reporting, can you like walk us through the process of how things look internally?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it is really different. We use commodity hardware. We use Hamilton liquid handlers, which have been around for quite a while. We have a great relationship with Hamilton. They make an amazing product. We use them extensively at Moderna as well. And they're available to anyone, right? I mean, you can go out, any CRO can go buy Hamiltons and use them in their labs. Traditionally, the view was that robotic liquid handling, automation, in this case, in the bioanalysis world, is difficult. And because it's difficult, it really only makes sense in very high volume settings. So if I have a phase 3, infectious disease study, and I've got thousands and thousands of samples coming back in, it's worth having my automation team build a method on Hamilton or Tcan or whatever the platform is, high res, and worth them building that method to run the same thing over and over and over again thousands of times. But the other kind, like what we're offering, which is a flexible platform that can run any ELISA, any MSD, any LCMS assay, and do it in a way that's extremely efficient, even all the way down to a very small number of samples. Like if you come to us, we have sample minimums because we don't charge for materials, so we eat the cost on the plates and the consumables when we run a plate. So we often, it depends on the assay, but it's often 20 or 30 sample is there's the minimum. If we were running 30 samples for a client, we would still do it on our automation platform. Like we would not then like revert back to some kind of manual hand pipetting manual process. And it's extremely different than the traditional model. So what happens for us is it comes in, if at all possible, it comes in on compatible labware, like actual vials that we can read on the deck. If not, and sometimes we come in later in the process where we don't get to define tube types, and that's something that's already been decided before we get involved. We can still accession, right? We move it across to the tube types that work on the deck. And then from then on, essentially everything happens on the deck, right? So ELISA is a great case of like what we started with. Almost all the steps are liquid handling. In some of the other assay types, there are some sort of minimal interactions of moving a plate onto a reader or minimal things like that. But in general, the idea is to dramatically reduce the number of human touch points, dramatically reduce the human labor aspect. And you see it in the numbers, right? Quantitatively, we can show this, right? When you look at plate effects, or you look at CVs on our platform, you get really phenomenal numbers compared to doing things by hand. And this is all, we have data we're going to be publishing. We have press release and other cool stuff coming up. We're going to be talking about kind of the quantitative difference between running assays on automation hardware and running it manually. And we're going to be addressing what are seen as some of the traditional concerns about automation hardware, including low sample volumes and retains. And there's very much ways to solve for those challenges.
All of the benefits of automation are sort of there, and like in the way that you're describing it, you've got sort of the fast turnaround time because the automation can be working hypothetically 24/7, and you're not, and then there's also the better CVs or coefficients of variation, the better reproducibility relative to the manual labs. What am I missing in terms of the criteria by which someone would evaluate a bioanalysis lab? Like why would taking a skeptical eye? Why would someone choose to do things the way that they were done previously? Or is there something that they're just not understanding or not trusting about it?
No, I mean, look, the first part, it's an interesting outlier. Right? If you came and said, "Hey, we need really high quality making these chips for Intel, so we're going to do it by hand," we'd be like, "That doesn't make any sense." Right? I mean, you literally can't at this point. And the quality and variability that you get in, as somebody like TSMC is way beyond what we traditionally see in bioanalysis, which is impressive, extremely impressive. And Intel literally, it started by hand etching chips, but stopped hand etching chips in 1971. That was the last time they hand etched a chip. And I think that we're at that moment now in bioanalysis, right? We'll see that shift. Well, that said, buyers are rational. Bioanalysis is where your biology turns into data. You spend all this money on a clinical trial or an in vivo study, and essentially all of that money is to generate the data that comes out, the bioanalysis process. And there's other data generated as well, but the majority of it is to generate this data. And because of that, it is an understandably risk-averse market. It's a highly regulated market. It's a market where tradition holds a lot of sway, the way that things have been done. And that's not a bad thing. It's just that makes sense, right? In a risk-averse regulated market. So we as a new vendor, a new supplier with a new approach, have to show the market that like in all the scientists, the buyers, the really, brilliant people who work in this space, we have to show them that we're a trustworthy partner and the right option. I also totally agree with you. Like big picture, you said, hey, I'm going to go, I'm going to design cars using CAD modeling and 3D printing, and then I'm going to hand assemble them, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. But that's actually what we do in drug development, where we're used to a high degree of automation and high throughput screening and hit to lead type work and early stage research work. We do a lot of automation, and everyone's used to that. But then you get to a GLP lab, and it's done by hand with literal like paper and pen, and the change has not happened there yet, and I hope it does soon. Like that's what we're pushing for.
The thing that occurs to me as I'm hearing you describe it is just that, the market might be used to, like, obviously, like, the pain of those 3 meals and the legal seafood dinner where you finally get a quote is they're used to it, but also like the level of customizability that they get, or the level of like hand holding like they get. Is there an element of fear there, of like letting go of ceding control in some regard that might be there, or like I'm just not as close to it as you are. So
yeah, I don't think it is control. I think it's a legitimate concern about the science is hard, and so am I going to get as good support from an automation-centric shop as I'm going to get from a consulting-centric shop and sort of a labor-centric shop. And the truth of the matter is we have an advantage there. We're a high-growth VC-funded startup based in Boston. And so we're not just in a primary market, we're the primary market for biotech, and we're in the primary market for biotech and scientific talent. And we get to hire from a different talent pool, right? We get to hire people who want to change the world and have a huge impact and join a really high growth team that literally shift the fundamental, metrics in this industry. The traditional bioanalysis CROs tend to be in secondary and tertiary markets in Midwest, Quebec, so places that they can bring down their cost structure to maintain their margin because they're worried about their margin. So, and I made the joke earlier about hiring senior scientists in Wisconsin, but that's literally the problem that they face, and because of that too. I mean, look, if you've done bench work in the past, and most people in the BioA space have done, doing the same assay over and over again tends to be where people start their career, maybe right after their PhD or something like that. Like it tends to be where you maybe start your career, but you don't really want to do it for long, right? It's not it's a tough job, right? You're doing this a repetitive task, and it's not super rewarding. You're sort of disconnected from the the value delivery, from the patient, from the creation of value in the industry. So they're going to have a harder time, and they do. Like there's retention problems, there's turnover. It's a high turnover job, which makes sense, right? I wouldn't want to do the same ELISA 1,000 times in a row. And then when they need to accelerate, often they'll charge 2x or 3x, to move twice as fast or 3 times as fast, which still is like weeks. Like it's nothing close to like the days that we do as turnaround time. But it's because they literally have to ask a senior scientist with a PhD to work nights and weekends instead of going home, to their family and their kids. And that's a tough ask, right? Hey, do you want to come in at night on the next 3 days to keep these ELISAs, running? Like that's a really tough ask. We have a different model, right? Where it's running on automation equipment. It's technician labor, it's automation scientists, but we can scale up much more rapidly. It's a very different platform. So we can attract a different caliber of scientists, which means like the method development work, the core, that kind of core scientific work, which tends to be that upfront, right? Rather than the execution. We've got really brilliant people who do that with our customers.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also, to the extent possible, you can try to, reduce the burden of that method development and, like support and scaffold that in whatever ways are possible.
Yeah.
I'm interested in sort of like the regulatory angle on the type of automation that you're bringing to bear, because as I understand it, like a lot of the outputs from what Dash does, end up in, regulatory packages. And so, how do you think about, the platform that Dash is developing in the context of, meeting the needs of both your customers that have regulatory requirements and then, your internal operations that I believe are subjected to regulatory requirements as well?
Yeah, so we're a full GLP lab, good lab practices, which is for us a major milestone to do that within our first year, and then achieve that milestone this fall. And we've gone through 2 audits now, and we are fully committed to being a clinical lab going forward, right? Meaning you need to be GLP to do clinical work, and that is it's a significant regulatory requirement, burden, set of rules, and to the point that since founding, roughly a third of our company by headcount, and probably more than that by spend, because we use some consulting hours as well, has been dedicated to quality. Right, so quality as a group has been one of the largest teams at the company, and will continue to be a very significant part of the company going forward. That unique combination flows through to really all aspects of the business. A lot of our software developers come directly from larger Moderna and other companies where they've done software development under CSV or 21 CFR, which is computer systems validation, or 21 CFR, which is a specific FDA regs around software. So that set of that combination of experience, team, people, process, technology is really difficult. Right? I mean, there's no way around it. It's hard. It's why most startups in our world avoid the clinical space. And you get kind of a donut hole where you get a lot of startups in the preclinical world, including tech bio and other companies that focus on that space. And you get a bunch in sort of the commercial or direct to consumer or sort of real world type models, or, clinical trial enrollment and things like that. But the actual sort of core scale up of drug development has been a little bit of a sort of there be dragons piece of the map when it comes to funding its startups. And part of the reason is that you have a huge regulatory burden. So it's tough. You have to go out and explain that one of the first things you're going to spend a lot of VC dollars on is quality, and before you ever get to product market fit. The good news for Dash is we knew exactly where we wanted to go with the company. We're experienced operators and industry veterans, so we were able to make that happen. But it's not easy.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in, given that it's sort of like you've got that the donut hole model, and you all, as I believe, raised your seed round and were able to find funding for the model. So clearly you were able to get believers behind you to put the money up for, as you put it, the the heavy capex investment that's required in order to embody the model that you're describing. So I'm just interested in what were the questions that your funders the hardest questions that your funders asked you that you had to answer, and how did you convince them that this, even in a biotech space that is in a downturn with regard to funding, you all were able to find this niche?
Some of the questions, and it did take some time to refine our pitch and figure out the go-to-market strategy and show that this was an area it made sense to invest in. And one of the fundamental questions that we got from the beginning was, why not build a tool or a marketplace or something that was just the tech, right? Why not just build the tech? And the answer was that the service providers weren't there. There's nothing to integrate to. There's nothing to back end it with. I can't just call up their services via an API or somehow integrate with these providers and put them together in a marketplace. They wouldn't even know what to do with that, right? They wouldn't even know how. You'd get back one line quotes that somebody generated. It would all be one-offs, right? Nothing would be, you wouldn't have a data model that worked. You wouldn't have an ontology that worked. None of that would actually function. And we've seen that in the previous attempts to build marketplaces for this space, and that getting that story across. That ultimately, I think, is where we got our wins with VCs. And it's well, then if we can do that, if we can build that model, right? Amazon didn't build AWS by buying old data centers. It didn't build AWS by integrating with other people's data centers, right? They had to build the hardware. But once they built the hardware, it became a sticky, almost tech-based play. And that's the huge value prop that we're trying to deliver to customers, which is, if you start using us, I mean, honestly, we'll make it easy for you to move off of us, but why would you want to? And we've seen this already with our first customers, which is how we raised our second round so quickly. with our first customers, we have 100% success rate on pilots. Like if somebody does a pilot with us, they use us. And that is not normal in life sciences, right? In life sciences, typically you get this sort of death by pilot. Big pharma will offer pilots. They'll sort of try it out. Here's the cool new thing. They've got FOMO. They don't want to miss out on something, but it doesn't become like this sticky service that then rapidly scales up. And it's, so far Dash, and long may this continue. Everybody who's done a pilot with us then goes on to use us commercially. And that's a great story to tell.
Yeah, and I mean, as you were describing sort of the AWS comp, if I recall correctly, like the story of AWS is that AWS always had, the one big customer in Amazon.com that could serve as the main driver of efficiencies into the primitives that were developed within AWS. But through being in Boston and having the relationships that you all have, you've been able to like get those first customers, and also it sounds like sort of the low number of samples that people can start with means that like they can pilot relatively cheaply and understand the capabilities of the platform relatively easily. Am I thinking about that right?
Yeah, and the cool thing for us is we're going to market with a better mousetrap, right? Like we talk about, I think, and you'll see this in the, I'm interested to see how the AI market shakes out. And I'm talking specifically within life sciences, because there's a lot of new products that have come to market with this idea of like, hey, we're a net new product and it's really cool and you should use us. But you don't have anything in your budget for this. You've never heard of this before. And we promise it's got a high ROI. But the problem with that is, and I've known people at like larger pharma, they work in oncology, they're getting 100+ pitches a year for things like AI for drug discovery. They can't buy 100 products. There's no way. There's not even if you bought 100 products, you couldn't deploy them or use them successfully. So the ROI can't be true for all of those, right? And you're going to see consolidation. The difference for Dash is we're building something that is a solution to an existing and known problem and a critical path item that you already have to pay for. You have to pay for bioanalysis. Like it's part of your clinical development timeline 100% of the time. And so every single biotech pharma company, this is something either they're paying for directly or through, as you said, through an aggregated larger contract, but either way, it's something that they're paying for. And so when we come in and say, hey, we're doing exactly that, like, exactly what we're doing, but we've got really fantastic data on how it's higher quality because of the automation. It's much faster turnaround time because of the automation. And because of those two things, we don't have to pay a huge amount of human labor costs. So it's actually cheaper as well. And there's no gotcha moment. Like there's no other pass-throughs that we charge you or fees that come out at the end of the study or something like that. There's no like study setup costs or data transfer fees or materials costs. We don't even charge for the materials. There's no gotcha moment. It's just better, faster, and cheaper. Then why not use it, right? And then there's all the reasons why, right? Like the reluctance, the industry, the regulatory environment. You have to prove that you can use a new thing. But that's the big difference between us and a lot of the sort of pure play AI companies is that they're trying to convince customers to use on there. Honestly, buyers are kind of, I think, tired of hearing it. I wonder when VCs will get tired of it, but tired of hearing it. We're in that, we've sort of fallen a little bit into the trough of disillusionment in that cycle, and then we'll get to the value realization over time. And I think that's what to me, that's what Dash is value realization on using technology in an applied way that solves a problem that exists, that's already on your critical path as a biotech or biopharma company.
Are there any areas where you think AI has a particularly high opportunity to drive value in the space, or places where it should be applied more, should be being applied more readily, that it's not being applied presently?
Yeah, well, first, let me add, I would love it if AI for drug discovery works brilliantly, right? Like as somebody, I've got a rare autoimmune issue. And for me, a lot of the journey behind Dash and what I do is driven by this realization I had over the past few years that I'm in the industry. I have a lot of access to care. I've had a lot of great people working with me on the challenges that I've had. And with all kinds of nerve damage, neuropathy, and Meniere's disease, the best options available to me were still gabapentin and prednisone. And I don't want to be on prednisone for the rest of my life. And that's one patient population among with many who just don't have the treatment options that they should have. So I would love it if we can dramatically accelerate drug development. My take, and this is one of the reasons that we founded Dash, and that Dash is the company that we've decided to build around the clinical scale up side of it, is that even if we dramatically accelerate the preclinical world and we are able to bring more drugs to, right up to an IND filing, we still have the same pipeline in the clinic that we've had. And we still approve about 50 new drugs a year, and we've done that for the past 40 years. That number has not shifted much in 4 decades. So we're not bringing more drugs to market. We're not bringing more new solutions to patients who need them. Obviously over time it aggregates, but the pace hasn't accelerated. And that to me is the thing that really needs to shift. That's the thing that I really care about. I do think there are some areas. I invested in a company called Centrillo that's AI for post-stroke care, right? There's companies like that are focusing on what happens in terms of managing care for patient populations. I think that's a brilliant use of AI. And we're seeing a lot of it in the patient, like note-taking and other areas with sort of like the healthcare world, within the drug development space. I think that, it's going to take some time to see the benefits apply through. But I truly believe, Dash is an example of where if we take an applied approach, look at a problem that exists in an existing capability that needs to be accelerated, that we can dramatically shift, those metrics. I mean, again, I'll use my favorite AWS example, but compute existed before AWS, but you couldn't buy it by the second, right? So if you wanted to build if you wanted to do some next-gen sequencing work, you need to build this big data cluster yourself. Now I can spin it up, use it for 5 minutes, and shut it down again. That's an incredible capability that just cut my cost by 99%. And that on its own, that changes the model, right? Now anyone can do NGS. Anyone can do these sort of huge data projects that they never would have been able to do 15 years ago.
Yeah, I want to be sensitive to your time, so I'll just give you the final point. Anything else you want to leave us with in terms of your work at Dash?
It probably comes across, but I'm just extremely excited, right? Like, I think that we're at an inflection point here as an industry where we're going from a traditional analog paper-based model, and we're taking, all the value creation of the last 20 years that's been applied in other industries, markets, areas, and applying it to clinical drug development. And I think that is such a meaningful impact if we can bring down those costs, accelerate the timelines, and then help bring those drugs to market for the patient populations with the unmet need. And that's the thing that I care about.
Yeah. And where can people go to learn more about Dash and more about you?
Yeah, dash.bio. And you can see dash.bio we've got the pricing page, we've got the quoting tool, we've got the video of our lab with all the automation running. We're an extremely transparent shop and very easy to work with. So if you build up a quote and send that in, that'll come to my team, and we'll be able to quickly get back to you with a proposal.
Awesome. Well, Ander, it's been a pleasure having you on the podcast. We really appreciate it.
Thanks so much.
And that's it for this episode of Data in Biotech. If you enjoyed the episode, please subscribe, rate, or leave a review in your podcast platform of choice. See you next time.